Okay, so in this piece, this E minor prelude of Chopin, he writes largo, which means very slowly. He writes espressivo, which of course means expressively. And he writes sempre tenuto, which means always long. Tenuto means long, giving the notes their full value. So on the left hand, I don't want to sort of play this. I want to keep those notes as long and connected as possible, which of course I do largely with the pedal. Now, this is an interesting piece because the melody has these very long notes which have to be sustained for a long time. And of course, they tend to die out on the piano after a while. If I play this note, it starts to disappear after a couple seconds. And after a few more, it's hardly audible anymore. Now, what this means is that even though he writes piano in the melody, we have to give it a great singing tone so that this top note continues as I play the notes in the left hand. Otherwise, it's just going to get drowned out by the left hand and we're not going to hear anything of this beautiful melody up above. So think at least mezzo forte in the right hand, and in the left hand, really as soft as possible. Really, really, really in the background. And try to emphasize the top note of the chord in the left hand so that we have this sort of sound and not... And always concentrating that all three of the notes are being played at exactly the same time. Not sort of like this, but really all of them exactly together. Now, absolutely crucial to the feeling of this piece is this idea which we call tempo rubato in the music of Chopin. That means that the meter is not fixed. In other words, I don't have four, or in this case, two equal beats per measure. I can play with that slightly. So instead of counting 1 and 2 and, I can count 1 and 2 and. Depending on what I want to do with the music, I can be very flexible with the notes. Now, there's good taste and there's bad taste, and this is a very complicated issue. How do you stretch those notes? Where do you do it? Where do you not do it? The absolute best advice that I can give you is to take this piece, once you've learned it, and play along with several recordings of really great pianists like Arthur Rubinstein, for example, and see what these pianists do with the time. You'll notice that they play the chords in the left hand not all exactly the same as if it were being performed by a computer or a robot, but with a great amount of flexibility and rubato. So, for example, when I begin, rather than just starting immediately in tempo with the left hand, I might want to let it gather a little steam. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and so forth, so that I have some flexibility. And when I change the harmonies also, really just take a moment to enjoy them. There's not a right or a wrong answer, but really just listen to the harmonic development of these chords in the left hand. And when you feel that a particular chord is very expressive, you might want to take a little bit more time. And as I mentioned, just listen to a lot of great pianists, and you'll start to get a sense of what some possible things are that you can do with the time in this piece, with the sense of time, with the sense of timing, and what we call tempo rubato. In this section, we have the word stretto. That means we want to move ahead. Stretto means rushed. We start to rush ahead in this spot. In other words, we get faster there. And then as the music dies back down, we return to our original tempo. And in the last line, Chopin writes smorzando, which means dying away. In other words, we're getting softer, we're getting slower, as if the music is disappearing. From the last line here, getting softer and slower. 1, 2, count here, 3, 4. And we have a fermata there, which means we can wait especially long before the last note. That means we can hold this rest out longer than it would normally be. A lot of people tend to get impatient and just rush through this spot. It's supposed to be a very dramatic moment at the end, so just give it its due time. One other thing I'd like to point out, by the way, Chopin writes this piece in 2/2 time, which means instead of thinking of 2, 3, 4, we can of course count the piece that way, but in terms of musicality, we want to be thinking of it in two groups of 2. 1, 2, That'll help keep the music moving along and will prevent it from getting too bogged down with all of those chords in the left hand. Happy practicing, and I'll see you in the next piece.